Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Big development over the last couple of days in the Italian press with suggestions that Lewis Hamilton, after driving the SF-23 and 24 in some of the practice testing sessions that he's had over the last couple of weeks, has been impressed with the way that a car maybe suits his particular driving style. It's been a big point of question, certainly after Alonso and Vettel went to Ferrari over the last decade or so and didn't achieve the success they were hoping for with the Scuderia, whether Hamilton will end in a similar situation. But after much discussion over the fact that last year's Mercedes and the style of the way that car was designed did not suit Hamilton as well as it suited George Russell, early indications say the way that Ferrari approached this ground effect era may be a very different story. Very much on Twitter, your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Beginning with the following. Valtteri Bottas is back at Mercedes. We know that there was talk from Toto Wolff that, oh, well, you can keep the ugly mullet, but you're not, bearing arse for the cameras, I guess, to put it bluntly. And apparently Bottas has said, all right, I'm going to keep the nudity to a minimum out of respect for Mercedes' title sponsor. So, again, I guess that's what it comes down to, that Petronas, the oil company involved in this, might not be so happy with Bottas doing whatever he might want to potentially do. Toto, on a human level, I don't imagine cares at all. But of course, Toto Wolff is an owner of the team. He's the team principal of Mercedes, AMG Petronas Formula 1 team. So obviously there are other things to uphold. So that's the interesting thing with Mercedes, right? Like, okay, they are a German car brand with a certain reputation, but equally, given the partner situation, it's just been a conversation point because Verstappen may be considering his potential avenues away from Red Bull. We talked about it yesterday. In the next couple of years, Mercedes could be an option, but, they're an interesting team for a couple of reasons, and maybe they're not that fast anymore. That's another question as well. They hope that Bottas can help in that regard somehow. His former team, Sauber, Audi are fully taking them over, basically, at least for 2026. They're trying to ramp up the amount of personnel they have on board. So Audi are taking it serious, no doubt about it. I mean, the big teams in Formula 1 have 1,000 plus, really, personnel. Audi are looking to get up to 900. So that puts them in the ballpark of what would be considered a reasonably competitive team on paper anyway. Of course, what those personnel do is another question, and that's got to be executed on. Mattia Binotto, of course, is over there now trying to lead the show after they parted ways with Andreas Seidel. So we'll see how this goes. There's not that much optimism, it's got to be said, around the Audi project as it stands. And look, one more year of Sauber, basically kick Sauber for the new season. But Audi effectively completely run the show there now. They certainly will for 2026. Mohammed Ben Sulayem runs the show at the FIA, and there's been further drama about this over the last few days. No one supports the swearing clampdown, apart from maybe Toto Wolff, depending on his perspective on the day. I don't even think he does on a personal level, but, obviously there are politics in play here in Formula 1. So the president, Ben Sulayem, has said, and he was asked this question before, right, because we know that he doesn't like the drivers swearing. We seem to be back to this era where the drivers just have to be robots again. And they're certainly not going to be, by the way, like Max Verstappen, or, maybe he's just going to run his own press conferences again, as he did last year, much to the upset, I guess, of the FIA. But, of course, Ben Sulayem was asked the question, like, hang on a second, it's not just like the drivers are swearing, but the broadcast is using the radio messages on the broadcast. They don't have to publish the ones and have them on the broadcast if they don't want to. They obviously vet all of them. And Ben Sulayem said, oh, well, we can't do much about that. Apparently they probably can, and well, anyway, this is what he's talking about, that they might do a shutdown of the team radio messages to combat driver profanity. I mean, it's like, what sport are we even watching anymore? Who actually cares? So understandably, everyone was going off on the main stage about this over the last couple of days. This is a clip of Leclerc and Austin. You guys probably remember when Max got his lap time deleted and Xavi was on the radio to Leclerc saying lap time deleted, Verstappen, and Leclerc was like, oh my god, I thought you meant it was my lap time deleted, and he was swearing on the radio. Like, you're not going to prevent the drivers swearing in the heat of the moment, especially when, for a lot of these guys, English isn't their first language, and these words are like the first words they learned. So, let's be real, when Mohammed Ben Sulayem crashed that Formula 1 car off the start, you guys have probably seen the clip on YouTube a number of times, was he happy about it? Like, what words did he say at the cockpit at that moment? Do you know what I'm saying? Right? This is sports, this is energy, this is passion, this is emotion, and I don't think we should be shutting it down. There was also this discussion here because, I mean, it's not wrong that on the broadcast, on the radio broadcast, they literally like bleep it all out. All the swearing stuff, it's bleeped out on the audio and all this. And okay, sure, you can still access it on the F1 media, F1 TV, whatever behind the scenes, but it's like, why? So at this point, I honestly think he just says things to say them. I don't really understand it. He even said this: do we go on and then shut down the radios of live communications? Maybe. Do we delay it? Maybe. Well, like, first of all, they already do delay it. Like, it is already delayed. Everyone knows this. So I don't know what that's about. And then do we shut them down? Why? I mean, like, come on, give me a good reason here. Other than also, from, Ben Sulliam's sake, given the fact that they've got this new moral injury to the FIA guidelines, where if you break it once, you get a €40,000 fine. You break it twice, you get an €80,000 fine, plus a suspended 1 month suspension. You break it 3 times, you get a €120,000 fine, a guaranteed immediate 1 month suspension from the sport, and championship point deductions. Surely Ben Sulliam's like, yeah, crack on, lads. Say what you want on the radio. We'll punish you. We'll get the money in our pockets and we can spend on a nice steak dinner somewhere. So it is a joke, isn't it, this sport? Let's be honest. The one thing I wanted to mention before we talk about the Hamilton thing, though, just there's been some discussion on this over the last few days. There are a lot of rookies on the grid next year, and it's worth keeping that in mind because the last couple of seasons, it's not really been like this. And we have another year again where we could get chaos. I mean, it's obviously been a talking point when you get big championship battles, as we are expecting to have this year. Who's going to win this championship? Who the hell knows? Like, Max, I guess, is the favourite. Lando might be the favourite. The Ferrari pairs, Piastri might be better this year. Who knows where Mercedes will be? I mean, it's a complete mess. But also, you've got to consider, we have many drivers on the grid that we, in Formula 1 context, don't know much about. Now, sure, Lawson and Behrman, we've seen them drive a bit, but not really that much, to be honest. Colapinto, we've seen have a few rounds. He's probably going to be in the car for Jack Doohan, but we're not sure at this point. Hadjar is, an unknown, and in many respects, kind of expected to be similar to Yuki Tsunoda in his first couple of seasons, very raw to put it bluntly, and Bortoletto as well we don't really know much about. And then there's Antonelli, who seems to be very quick, but let's not forget he did crash that car at FP1 at Mercedes in Monza, so there's that whole thing going on. Then you've got Lance Stroll you add into the mix as well. There's always chaos brewing with him on the grid. So you look at the grid and you say, well, we've got Lawson, Antonelli, Doohan / Colapinto, let's just say 3, Hadjar, Behrman and Bortoletto. That's basically a third of the grid that are rookies or, have not much experience in Formula 1. So are we expecting one of these guys to go bowling at Turn 1 in Hungary? It's absolutely possible. Speaking of Lance Stroll, he was actually doing some rallying in Portugal this weekend, which was pretty interesting to note, just because there's been a feeling over the last couple of years, there's actually been lots of speculation, hasn't there, as to whether Lance Stroll might retire from Formula 1. There was even that weird speculation, I don't know how long ago, that he was going to retire and become a tennis professional. But it does seem like Lance Stroll's a bit jaded with Formula 1. I'm sure that he and his father want him to keep racing, but you've got to remember, like, Stroll's been around in Formula 1 now for a very long time, and he's had some success. That success may be around the corner again in 2026, we don't really know, but I think it's doubtful that Lance is on the grid beyond 2026. He may want to, his father may want him to at least drive a Newey car in 2026, that's possible. But I don't think that Lance Stroll I don't think his head is really in it, maybe as it used to be. And I think there's other things that he wants to do, especially with Aston Martin developing their Valkyrie program, their, hypercar program in, of course, the World Endurance Championship. That's something that Lance Stroll could be deployed to do. That might be very successful as well. Obviously, Newey's been involved in that project as well to some degree. Here he is rallying. So it just feels like the end of Lance Stroll in Formula 1 is closer than it's ever been, but I don't know if you guys feel the same way, because maybe Lawrence Stroll feels differently, but at the end of the day, it's got to be on what his son wants, to be honest, and his son is never going to be a World Drivers' Champion, because even if the car is good enough, Alonso's going to beat him, or they're going to get Max or something. So that's intrigue to your thoughts in the comments below. The other point, though, is on Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari. He drove a number of Ferrari cars over the last couple of weeks, got his time in the SF-23 and his time in the SF-24, of course notably crashing the SF-23, we believe anyway, at the final corner at Barcelona on his day of testing there, I think on his second day of testing possibly, and there's been various comments even from Bernie saying that it's not going to end well, Hamilton's not going to last more than a couple of years, he's jumping in and it's not going to work out, whatever, that people are going to have their perspective one way or the other on this, and it's going to be a challenge for both parties, I imagine, but I think it is still the correct decision given the context of everything that we have seen over the last couple of years. Juan Pablo Montoya, for example, heavily disagrees and says if the car's good enough, Hamilton's going to win everything, potentially including the 8th World Championship title. One critical component, though, for 2025 is the qualifying performance of the car. I think there's no doubt at all that Leclerc is going to be rapid in qualifying. Hamilton's qualifying performance is a question mark, but also it does depend to some degree on the way the car suits Hamilton's style. Every driver has a certain ceiling, of which many of the drivers, including Hamilton and, let's say, Verstappen, have an incredibly high ceiling, but depending on their particular styles and the way they like to drive a car, different elements of the car will hinder that ceiling to a certain extent. It's no secret that while Verstappen is incredible, if you give him a car which is more understeery, then, let's say Baku last year or whatever, when Perez was actually able to straight up outshine him, Max isn't able to, deliver with that car what he might be able to deliver with another car that behaves in a different way. And even for the absolute greats in Formula One, this is a deciding factor to some degree, although the real greats and the real best of the best can, adapt to various circumstances very well. But even then, even the absolute best still have their limitations in some regard. Hamilton's real advantage in his Formula One career has been his strength under braking, right? Braking super late, somehow managing not to lock up the tyres. Okay, he always would occasionally, but he always had a big advantage in that element of the track, braking, getting the car turned in, and really gliding the car through the corner. These recent Formula One cars, especially the Mercedes, and maybe less so the Ferrari, haven't really suited that style because the cars have moved massively towards anti-dive suspension at the front, so when he slams on the brakes, the car doesn't really do much. It doesn't really lurch forward as he might expect, and certainly the Mercedes didn't seem to suit his style at all. It seemed like in order to compensate for the way that Hamilton tried to attack the corners, he'd end up overheating the rear tyres and, basically causing a bit more degradation and also compromising his performance in the third sector of a qualifying lap, stuff like this. So Hamilton understands these things and I'm sure he's trying to combat it, but when your teammate is an excellent qualifier in George Russell, for which the car seemed to work quite well over the last year or so at Mercedes, that's been a question mark. The big question mark for many was, okay, so Hamilton 2024 Mercedes didn't really get along especially well, especially in qualifying conditions. How about the Ferrari? Maybe the way that they design the cars is different. And that's been the big question really for many to try and understand, is how Hamilton feels about driving these cars, because clearly Hamilton doesn't especially like the ground effect cars, but certainly didn't especially like the ground effect cars that Mercedes were building. If he feels differently about the Ferraris, that is a sign that, we could have a really strong Hamilton on the grid again next season. Do we know what he thinks? No. But we have some rumours and we have some speculations. So, Gazzetta came out and said that he found himself in a better position than any of the recent Mercedes. At least there has been some speculation to that end. This was the article here in the original Italian, and here it is translated into English. So if we scroll down, he did a couple of private tests, obviously, right? He had the test at Fiorano, and then he had the test, later on in Barcelona, which, both of which are a very big deal. Now, whether you guys believe these words that the Italian press are talking about is a question. Who are their sources? Obviously a manifold debate. But this is what was said. The most interesting aspect of the test carried out is the fact that Lewis was able to drive the Ferrari SF-23 from 2 years ago and the SF-24. Of course, they were both modified, but effectively those were the last couple of years' Ferraris. In both cases, he had good feelings, praising the behaviour of the cars, even that of the SF-23, considered to be a difficult single-seater. Some say that Hamilton immediately found himself better than the Mercedes he has driven in recent seasons. Now, of course, there's one final step. So, yeah, what do you guys think about this? It's interesting. Of course, Hamilton will have given his feedback to the team, and I'm sure those in the team will have spoken to certain people. So, is this just Italian press gassing it up? Possibly. I mean, we are in February, and it is Ferrari talk, so we know what that usually means. It's, optimism upon optimism upon optimism. This is how it works at Ferrari. But still, if this is true, that Hamilton drove the couple of Ferrari cars, and even the SF-23, which he crashed, but was a difficult car, to say the very least, during the 2023 season, if he was pretty happy with the way that it felt underneath him compared to the most recent Mercedes, then that does say good things about the way that Ferrari are approaching their design. And also, let's not forget, Hamilton, was out of Mercedes in 2025, as we know. The development of that car at Mercedes will not have necessarily been in his favour. Whereas Loic Serra, who has left Mercedes to come to Ferrari, the belief is that some of the design decisions that he will make in due course will be to Hamilton's preferences, shall we say. So very much intrigued to your thoughts on that in the comments section below. The W13 scored 515 points. The W14 scored fewer. The W15 scored more. How will the Ferrari SF-25 get along? That's a very interesting question. Intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Just one final thing that you guys might find interesting. Max Verstappen has a new private jet. So we think that he might be getting $1 billion payday from Aston Martin, which obviously wouldn't arrive as $1 billion. But you know what I'm saying? It's possible that he might go to Aston. Now, he has a Falcon private jet. It looks like this. It's pretty stunning. He now has a new one, which is bigger and longer range, basically. So, I know people will either criticize this or say, fine. I think it's pretty cool, to be fair. Look at this thing. It's pretty spectacular, and it does look like a Bond villain's jet. He's got a new one because it will be able to fly direct from London or whatever all the way to Brazil, stuff like that, because private jets are pretty cool, but they don't necessarily have the longest range. Taking those massive trips will usually require a layover somewhere, and Max likes to fly to all these races on his own, so he can use his reported simulator on the jet, although apparently that doesn't exist. I don't know, nobody really knows the answer to those questions, I don't imagine, apart from those that have been on the jet. But he has got himself a new one, because then he can fly direct to all these races. He can do London to Singapore. He can, probably not London to Melbourne, but you know what I'm saying, right? The range is longer, and therefore it's going to be better for Max. That's the bottom line. So I thought that was an interesting update. But intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.